go. Okay. So, well, welcome to Old Testament 1. It's very exciting to be reading God's word with you. And I guess it'd be a good thing to do to pray first. Sandy, would you like to pray for us?
Yeah, Lord, thank you so much for the opportunities that you give us. We thank you that we have free access to your word, but Lord, we thank you that you have revealed yourself to us, and that part of that revelation, a big part of that revelation, started in Old Testament truth. And Lord, just pray that you would give us it as we look at it together, that all of us would be encouraged by what we read, able to know you and understand you more through your word.
Yes, so the first question got is, why the Old Testament? Why should we study it? Any thoughts about what? You know, Jesus is what we need for salvation. So why should we study Old Testament?
Well, it's all God's words. It's all important.
Context. A lot of the time, because a lot of the New Testament references things that happen in the Old Testament, but it's good to understand what they actually were before we understand the New Testament.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like foreshadowing for Jesus coming and like living, which is really cool. Like illuminates the fact that Jesus was always a part of it. It wasn't like, oh, God just chucked him help out later. It's always a plan.
It is one big story. It's not too. Yeah. We often hear people talk about the New Testament God and the Old Testament God as if they're different.
Yeah, it helps us understand the continuity and that God actually hasn't changed, that God's plan hasn't changed, and it helps us understand how Jesus is the fulfillment of God's plan. And that is so cool, because it's really encouraging when you make the connections in the New Testament and you go, my goodness, wow, that's so amazing. That's what I like. And some of the best times when you read the Bible, especially when you read the Old Testament, you go, oh my goodness, this is all about Jesus. Yeah. Anything else we want to ask at the beginning, Sandy?
Well, I guess part of it too is even, like you said, Kate, the context, it's all one picture of the same God. But one of the questions is, well, how then do we apply the Old Testament? How do we know what do we apply? You know, God gives. You know, we're going to be looking at Leviticus and Deuteronomy. How do we know what of that do we apply? Why don't we apply it in the same way that they do? So working through that, and as you look at the New Testament, where do we go? Okay, that's referencing the Old Testament. Yeah, or where do we go? Actually, that's not something we have to. That's a really big question. It's one that lots of people struggle with. I think that's another great reason to understanding the term biblical theology, the whole story, so that you've got a framework to hang those questions on, rather than just verses that you can't really understand if they're not in context.
Excellent. So we are going to be looking at the first 5 books of the Bible, which is in the Hebrew, the Pentateuch or the Torah. And so there's 5 books: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And they are actually foundational for our understanding of who God is, why we're here, and what God's plan is, and how his purposes are going to be fulfilled. So if we can actually get a handle on these 5 books of the Bible, actually it's going to help us understand other books in the Old Testament and how the New Testament is a fulfillment of what God has promised right from the beginning. If you think about the Old Testament, you've got these 5 books at the beginning, and then all the history of Israel after that, from Joshua through to the end of Chronicles, they actually reference back to how Israel conforms or not to what's established in those first 5 books. You find that the wisdom literature, so Ecclesiastes, Psalms, Proverbs, they all reflect on the law. So, if you're reading Psalms, then the Psalms are actually a reflection on the Pentateuch, on the law. They're a reflection on what God has said in different places in those first 5 books. Proverbs is actually the fun way of actually learning what the law says. So, you read Proverbs and it gives you all these little sayings, and they actually help you remember what the law is. And then you kind of can hang things on that about how you're going to behave because you remembered. Like it gives you like fun little word plays to remember the law. And then when you get to the New Testament, so many quotes come either from the Psalms, which are a reflection of the law, or from Deuteronomy. Like the number of quotes in the New Testament from Deuteronomy are actually the most number of quotes in the New Testament. So I actually refer to the law a lot in the New Testament, directly and indirectly. So the law is amazing. It's really important. It's foundational, and the rest of the Bible is read in the light and written in the light of these books. So it's really helpful to have a great handle on them because actually then you can then understand what the rest of the law, what the rest of the Bible is saying, and the prophets. Again, they actually are explaining what's going to happen to Israel on the basis of their response to the law, the first 5 books of the Bible, and how God is going to fulfill them. So they're looking back at what Israel has done, and then looking forward to what God is going to do in fulfillment. So which then points to the New Testament. So without these foundational books, we actually are going to be a bit without, like if you read the Bible without a compass, it's like they set the course for your reading of the rest of Scripture. And I want to tell you some fun things about the way that the Torah is structured, because one, it's really cool, and two, the way it's structured is actually a literary device that's used all the way through the Bible to help you work out what the important things are. And so I want to explain what a chiasm is, because a chiasm, has anyone ever heard of what a chiasm is before? A chiasm is a literary structure where you've got, it's like a frame around the outside, which then, I guess it's like a picture. So you've got a frame on the outside, and then you've got like the matting on the inside, and then you've got the picture in the middle. And so when you've got, let's have a look at the Old Testament, which is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Genesis is like the prologue, and Deuteronomy is the epilogue, and they mirror each other. And then Exodus and Numbers mirror each other, and you'll find when you read Exodus, it starts with the rescue from Egypt,
talks about the law and their wanderings in Egypt, in the wilderness, and then you get to Numbers and they wander in the wilderness, and then they get to the edge of the promised land where God is leading them. And so, and there's events in there that mirror each other. And so you've got Exodus and Numbers that mirror each other. And then right in the middle is Leviticus. And Leviticus itself, well, and each of these have a structure within themselves that is also chiastic. So you'll find that the beginning of Genesis is reflected at the end, and some promises you'll find right in the middle. Leviticus, which most people think is the most boring book in the whole Old Testament, because it's all laws and rules and sacrifices, right at the center of Leviticus, in chapter 16, is the Day of Atonement. And in the Day of Atonement is where God provides for the forgiveness of sin. And so right in the middle of the Torah is atonement. And so the whole point of the law is to show how God is going to provide for forgiveness of sin. So it's really cool, really fun. And you're going to find, well, if you read carefully different sections of the Old Testament, that they're going to use this chiastic structure to highlight what are important things. And so when you get to the flood narrative, we can see that, you know, there's the beginning and the end of the flood. The waters rise, the waters recede. The animals go on, the animals go off, like things like that. And it points to right in the middle is God saving Noah and his family from judgment. So there's lots of those in the Old Testament, and the whole of the Torah is masterfully written and structured so that when you look at it, you can remember it. Like, you know, the Jews actually learnt and to recite the whole of those books, like. But the way that Moses is written and structured is so that you've got hooks to hang it on, and so that you can remember things. And that's what these chiasm structures do. And they didn't have chapters and verses, and so, you know, the bits that are frameworks help them remember what's in the middle.
Sounds very,
yeah, yes.
So another way to think of it, you might refer to is like an ecumenism, like, so A, B, B, and C. So you've got A, B, C, B, A. But it might be A, B, C, D, C, D, A. Like it's the idea of going one and like that with A. Does that make sense? You actually see it a lot. See it all through.
And not just in the Old Testament, they use it in the New Testament. Paul uses it quite frequently. The gospel writers also use them when they're talking about who Jesus was, and some of the like how they structure writing in the New Testament. So it's a very common device, and it's really helpful for us to then pick up what's the most important thing. It's what's in it. And so, you know, the whole of the law, which tells us who God is, why he's created, and what his purpose is, right in the middle of that is the provision for the forgiveness of sin, which is amazing and defines its in Jesus. So just wanted to give us a big picture so that we can think about like how amazing not only is it because it's God's word, but the way that God speaks and the writers of the Bible structure their work is actually masterful. And literarily speaking, it's some of the most literarily complex and masterful in the world, in the world of literature, the poetry, the and the structures of the Bible are incomparable to other literature and ancient works. It's very masterfully put together, which we don't actually, when we read a translation, we can't necessarily pick it up as easily because we don't have the same word plays. And even though the translators try and translate it so that we understand, and there is a little bit of wordplay, there are word plays in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew, that we're not going to pick up.
Which is really interesting when you think people also saying, you know, the Bible is, you know, written by all these different people over such a big period of time. And some people will say, so that makes it less reliable. But what you looking at, actually, there are these incredible links, in an incredible way that it's structured and seen.
And so when we're thinking about the Torah, we're thinking about the writings of Moses. All throughout the Bible, these first 5 books are attributed to Moses. Jesus attributes them to Moses. The New Testament writers attribute them to Moses. So we take what the Bible says as being right. And so there are scholars that will say, oh no, it wasn't all Moses. Some other people wrote things. But according to what the Bible says, Moses is the author of these books. Does anyone have any questions about, you know, the course, the outline? If you haven't registered yet, you will get, if you've registered, you will get one of these books. But if you haven't registered yet, you wouldn't have received yet an outline, and the outline is the first week, which is this week. We're going to be looking at Genesis 1 and 2, creation and God's purposes. Next time, well, it's 10 weeks or 10 units. Sandy and I are thinking of trying to do maybe 2 units a week so that we can get the course done before the end of the term, just so that you get speed learning. Get speed learning, but then so that after the holidays, like after the term break, we can then go into a little bit more depth of exam stuff if you want to do exam.
It also depends on the class.
Yeah, and it also depends. I mean, if you think, nah, can't do 2 chapters this week, then that's fine. But, you know, we're okay.
Or if you ask any wonderful questions that we don't get to, that's even better.
Yeah. And so week 2, rebellion and judgment, then the patriarchs. So that gets us through Genesis. Exodus is 3 weeks of Exodus, or 3 units of Exodus. Leviticus is only 1 week. Numbers 2 weeks.
So Leviticus in 2 weeks, in 1 week.
Woohoo.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and there's 2 weeks for Deuteronomy. So 2 units for Deuteronomy, which you can do in 1 week. So you can do Leviticus, Numbers in 1 week, Exodus in 1 week, Genesis in 2 weeks. But you know, there's 10 units, so we can take 10 weeks if you want to. But I feel like, you know, we might lose a little bit of continuity after like 3 weeks break in the middle with Easter and the school holidays. And then there's Mother's Day as well after that. So the second term, there's not quite as much continuity. So if we can kind of power on in the first term, then yeah, up till the school holidays, then that'll be good. If you feel like up for it. So what we'd like to do now for the rest of the time is look at the first unit, which is Genesis 1 and 2. And because it's a nice short reading, we're going to go straight into the Bible. So if you want to open up, this is chapter 1. A note about structure. There's there's 2 units, you can say, in Genesis 1 and 2, and where the chapter marker is actually, I think, not in the best place, because the first unit of thought actually finishes at Genesis chapter 2 verse 3. So after chapter 2 verse 3 is a new unit of thought. And if you look at some versions of the Bible, if you look at Genesis chapter 1 all the way to 2:1, it's actually in kind of like a format where it looks like slightly different, and it's kind of poetical, and it's a different way of writing to narrative. So one of the things I want to say right up front, when we're reading the Bible, you get things that are slightly different. So there's, especially in the Pentateuch, if there's poetry or songs, there's going to be a slightly different format. And these are really important sections because they're the sections that you were written for people to remember, to sing, to remember. And so they're written kind of as summary statements. They're like poetic. And so, and there's lots of repetition. And so when we read Genesis chapter 1, we're going to see things are going to be repeated over and over again. And that's a literary device to help you remember. Because when it was first written, not everyone had access to the writing, and so they had to remember it, had to learn it. And so if they learned the key bits, which are the poetic bits, they're the bits that are going to tell people the history of Israel. They're going to explain the important bits to remember, and then they start learning all the other bits as well. And so Genesis chapter 1 to 2 verse 3 is this slightly different poetic language. It's not a poem as such, but it's poetic introduction. And we get the very first verse is like an overview. God created the heavens and the earth. And then we get an account of creation. And then we get like in chapter 2, an expanded view of part of the creation, specifically when God makes humans and their design.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Just before we start, what questions have you had for yourselves or other people have had about Genesis? So just before we start, what are some of the possible issues or difficulties you've had, or
You explain evolution. It's like the biggest one at that for a lot of reference.
is that a problem for you or?
No, it wasn't a problem for me. It was one that I had trouble explaining or figuring out how to explain. I think my go-to response has always been, if you actually look at the order of things that happen in the Bible, it follows evolution perfectly. So just because it happens over a 7-day period stated in the Bible doesn't mean that it was actually 7 days. Like our view of days, that's God's days, that's just periods of him working and resting. It's not our view of days.
But part of the question is people are coming with science and saying you have a science with Genesis.
Yeah.
I've heard a few times people are unsure whether this is actually how God created everything, or whether it's just a story of explaining how it happened.
Yeah, I think if you think about myths and legends and how there are different accounts of how the world came to be according to Greek and Roman gods or the First Nations stories, if you think about how those are told, the way that the Bible tells it is actually quite different. And it's if you think about myths and legends, Egyptian, Greek and Roman, they actually are almost reactive, and they put human understanding as to like how things were put together. Whereas this is a completely different perspective, and actually is God's words about how He has made the earth. In a way, it is explaining how the world was made. But if we trust that God is real and faithful, then we can trust that what He says about how He made things is also faithful. And it's not just a human interpretation of how the world came to be in the state that it is, whereas it's God's way of explaining how He made the world, and then how it came to be in the state that we find it. It's like there's two different things. So yeah,
and why so more, almost more why than how, that he did and why, as opposed to how, which is what science tries to explain. I remember when I was probably your age, when a boyfriend knew, and he read me a different creation story. So there. Okay. But I think the point is there are lots of creation stories. Every culture has a creation story. Every people has a creation story. And this is, that's not something we need to be afraid of. But like Jill says, how is Genesis?
Yeah.
And one of the other ways that's really different is that most examples, creation comes out of conflict. Often a conflict between gods, some sort of conflict between God and and it's kind of happened out of conflict. So as you read this, just have a think about that as well.
Yeah, actually, we can actually go to this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's good. I'm glad you said it. Yeah, so some of those old other myths, like they have angry gods who fight over each other, and when they make humans, it's almost like a side effect of their anger, and that they don't really have a purpose except to be like the discarded, unhelpful part of the gods fighting, and it's very different from how God describes when He makes people. So yeah. So would someone like to read from Genesis chapter 1 through to chapter 2 verse 3, please? Thank you.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good. He separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. And there was evening and there was morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water." So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it. And it was so. God called the vault sky, and there was evening and there was morning, the second day. And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters He called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit and seed in it, according to their various kinds." And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit and seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, And let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years. And let them be lights in the vault of the sky to give light on it. And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set them in the vault of the sky to give light on earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. And God said, let the water teem with the living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky. So God created the great creatures of the sea, and every living thing with which the water teems, and that moves about in it, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, be fruitful and increase in number, and fill the water in the seas, and let the birds increase in the earth. And there was evening and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind. And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea, and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them, male and female created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit and seed in it. They will be yours for food. And to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds in the sky, and all the creatures that move on the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant food. And it was so. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so what are some of the things that we notice about this account? Particularly, I guess, in terms of what things are repeated, what things stand out.
It was good.
It was good, yeah.
I've never actually heard it. According to this one, interesting.
Hmm.
Very ordered, you know. Which is actually interesting that science was started, like the study of science is because people see order in the universe, and that you realize that we can learn things through order. Really interesting.
I think that when we're confronted with people saying, oh, Genesis is mythological because it's not scientific, I think we've got to understand what literature is. Like, we don't expect a poem to be scientifically correct. It gives us images to help us understand a concept. And I think that that's what this is doing. It's giving us images and pictures to help us understand a concept. And what's the big concept that we need to understand? God is the one that said, let there be, and it was. What are the things that are repeated? And God said, it was good. It was so. It was so. It was good. Yeah, and there's an order.
I guess that it was it's like fulfillment. You know, God says it happened.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is a principle that the whole Bible is founded on. If God says something, then it happens. So it doesn't matter what God says, it's going to happen. And so, you know, if God makes a promise, it's going to be fulfilled. If God says, I'm going to destroy you if you do something wrong, it's going to happen. So God speaks, then it happens. So it actually tells us something about God. Tells us about how he interacts with his creation. So it's his word. He's a speaking God who communicates, and so therefore, when he makes his creation and his image is placed in the creation, we are his image bearers. Also, are communication, like they communicate. In verse 1, we get like a big summary statement. In verse 2, it says the earth was without form and void. So that sets an agenda for how God is going to create. So he's actually going to form. So he's going to add form. So you've got day 1, 2 and 3, there's form. He forms things. So he forms the heavens and the earth, the sea and the sky, the land and the land. And then what does he do? He fills those spaces. He fills the sky and the heavens with the sun and the moon. He fills the sea and the sky with fish and birds, and then he fills the land with animals and then humans. So he forms and then he fills. And so there's parallels in day 1 and day 4, 3, 2 and 5, 3 and 6. And the whole, like the culmination of creation is day 7, where he rests. And that actually doesn't end. Like all the others say in the morning, and then there was evening, and then there was the first day, morning, evening, second day. Day 7, there's no morning, evening. It's like, that's it. That's the final state. Final state is resting in God's presence. And that doesn't end. So the whole point of the creation is to then be in God's presence. And that is not going to end.
Of course, rest is then an important idea.
Yeah.
Just to, because people, when we're talking to people, they kind of, they'll often point out, for example, well, God created the day and light on day 1, but he didn't create sun and stars for day. So therefore, this is rubbish. Okay. And so it's actually that what Jules just said, the pattern. You know, when you think about any literature, it's written for a purpose. Okay, anything is written for a purpose. If I write a history of Australia to particularly show the history of women, then I'm going to write it in a particular way. I will have, you know, and there'll be there won't be there, but there'll be a particular, or if I'm trying to make a particular. So this is a type of literature, and again, what is God trying to show us? So when people come and go, well, it's not written scientifically. And go, no, that's not, what is it that it's trying to show us? And yes, he created it talks about because that's about when he tells us how he filled what he formed. So it's actually really, we need to be confident in understanding the type of literature and its purpose, so that we don't kind of feel like we have to flounder if that's brought up.
Yeah.
So, Julie, did you say there was a chiasm in their days?
Not in,
No.
this is, so this isn't,
Sorry,
No, there are parts in Genesis that there are chiasms, specific ones, but this one actually isn't. It's because it's a poem, it's a sequence, it's forming, filling, repetition. So, you know, when we're reading the literature of the Bible, it's not just one style. So there's poetic stuff, there's genealogies, which people get bogged down in, then there's laws, there's history, there's narrative. And so we need to get clear that, you know, we're not going to understand a poem in the same way that we're going to understand a law or a genealogy. And they are written in those ways because what Sandy said before, there's a purpose. And the purpose for this is to tell us why. Not necessarily like why and kind of how, but it's not a scientific explanation. creation. It's a poetic, you know.
Why and who?
Yeah, why and who?
And
Yes. Yeah. So we get in the Psalms lots of reflections on the creation, and so yeah, often the Psalms would refer back to the creation, and there's all this repetition, and I just want to put in your head now, which we'll come back to later on. And God said is repeated 10 times. Just file that away. No, not examination. Just file that away and remind me later on. Why did you say that? And so the purpose of creation is resolved in chapter 2, verses 1 to 3. So the purpose is so that all of creation can be in relationship with God and be blessed and be in this perfect relationship with God. And the pinnacle of creation, so what everything else is leading to is this creation of God's image being placed in the earth. And so what's the point of God's creating humans? Mm-hmm.
Careful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Able to represent him.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, so in verse 26, and God said, or then God said, let us make humans or humankind, man, in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion. So there's an order, but God has created something that reflects who he is, and he's put it in charge of the rest of creation. And so the job of humankind is to multiply and fill the earth with this image and to rule over what is there. And that reflects the character of God. And one of the first things that the man does when we look in chapter 2 is he names things. And if we remember in chapter 1, God made and then he called the day and the night. Well, he gives Adam that responsibility for animals. So he's actually reflecting God's character and who he is in that job of naming things. And we've got verse 27. He created man, and that's a singular, in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So the singular then creates a plurality. And the identity of the humans are derived not from each other and not from themselves, but from who God made them to be. And then he gives them a job. And it's a job that can't be completed on their own. Like if there was only one person, that job can't be completed on Adam can't complete it on his own. Because he needs to fill the earth. He can't do that by himself. He needs an other to do that.
So just to see, I think it's important, like that difference between the job, what man is created, mankind is created for, and the job that is then given, because the job reflects what is created for. As opposed to the job being the reason he was created. So does that make sense? So Julie just said that. Say it again.
Yeah. Yeah, say it again.
There's what mankind, man and woman, is created for, is to be the image of God, and then given a job to do. The job is not the reason. The job is the way, one of the ways that we are the image of God, by ruling over his creation. That's part of being in his image. So it's not the reason for creation, it's part of what we do to be the image, which is the reason for creation. Because you might confuse us too.
So if we look at that creation account, there's no way that we can think of any other explanation or there's no other person that can be given credit for the creation except for God. Genesis 1 presents the fact of creation. It gives us an insight into God's heart. What things about God can we understand from Genesis chapter 1? What are some of the characteristics of God that Genesis chapter 1 enables us to know?
Start gives you an idea of his power. Doesn't do anything, it's perfect.
Peace. Yes.
That he speaks to man. And he's saying that us.
So there's a plurality, he speaks of himself in the plural, which is maybe
There's a
interesting.
plurality.
Yeah, like that.
Yes.
Introduced to that in verse 2 as well, when he was the spirit. So that it is God.
And in the beginning, it's just this whole idea of let us, which the Old Testament kind of sits with, but Jesus actually fulfills. And there's a few verses in the New Testament that remind us that actually Jesus was their creation. John 1:1 is actually a reflection of Genesis. If someone wants to open up John 1:1, read what that says. And John is actually deliberately using language from Genesis.
Yeah, I'm so close. John 1:1.
Yeah.
In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God.
So John uses creation language because one, he calls the Word, but then he says the Word is Jesus. But how does God create? Through his Word. He spoke. John is profoundly showing us that Jesus, who is the Word, is actually how creation is made. And then there's the Psalms, and then in Colossians chapter 1. Yes, please. Thank you. We found it first.
He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created that are in heaven, that are on earth, visible and invisible.
Yeah. So, you know, John, so the New Testament links Jesus with creation and tells us that he's present in creation as God's word. And so the Old Testament hints at this, and then the New Testament explains it. So it's really, when we read passages like John 1:1, and then he's reflecting on the creation and then brings Jesus into it, it's how we ought to be reading it.
Shows us this really exciting thing, which is that the second person of the Trinity existed as Jesus in the New Testament, but existed as the second person of the Trinity always. So we've got the us. Yeah.
And it's also explicit here that there's the Spirit. It's the Spirit is hovering. Then we're going to see in chapter 2 that the Spirit's really important, because that's the breath that goes into the human, which is part of being God's image, is we have his Spirit as well. So the Hebrew word for spirit is the same as breath. And so just in terms of the creation and the order, so there is an order. It shows us that God is so a God of order, and that like the mythological creation accounts are all about chaos and how things happen, but God is a God of order, and he creates order. And he creates the order. And then there's this, before anything happens in the garden, there is a structure, and there is God created humans, and they are to be over the creation. Just as God is over everything, he puts them in this position to be over creation. And so then in chapter 2, we get that fleshed out, and we can see what God is doing specifically with the man and the woman, and actually explains a little bit more what it looks like to be in dominion, and what it looks like to be male and female created in God's image. So
Should we jump up and grab a glass of water?
yeah, good idea.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was just wondering halfway through the thing. Okay, I'm going to grab a bunch of.
Yes. Does anyone want the
Oh, you got water?
air conditioner on?
Yeah, it's a bit warm.
Yeah.
Well, we can open the door.
Yeah, no, I think that's the control of air. Does anyone else want to drink?
Yeah, can you grab me? He's organised. Uni students over here, bring me.
Yeah, bring them. Well,
Oh,
I wasn't. I had a bottle of
break lunch.
water, and I didn't bring it because I had all of these other things to bring. I had to bring flute.
Do you want a glass of water?
I had to. Yes, please, Karen. Please, Karen. Thank you. No, if you didn't, doesn't matter. I can live without it until the end of the session.
I think the idea of why is still like to be the image of God, but also, but why? You know, I think there's a sort of what did it tell us about God? That he just created such a love, like so lovingly created an opportunity for us to be in relationship with him, because that's what we're going to be. He's offering us that relationship. Really lovely.
And it doesn't mean that God was alone.
No.
He was actually perfect relationship in himself, like Father, Son, and Spirit were in perfect relationship, completely happy and contented. They didn't need anything, but because God is God, it's hard. It's to demonstrate that love and share that relationship with others. So it needs to extend his fellowship, something beyond himself. Oh, even better. Thanks, Ken. Just spilled on my new bottle. Sandy. I think because we got the egg and brown we shut it. In verse 4, this is starting kind of like a we've started like out widely. So the first sentence in Genesis chapter 1, God created the heavens and the earth, and then it narrows it down to this is what he did to create the heavens and the earth. And now it's narrowing it down. It's not like it's a whole different creation account. It's actually focusing in on some of the important aspects of, and God said, let there be animals, and God said, let us make man in our image. And in the very first thing it says in verse 4, it says, these are the generations of the heaven and earth. This phrase, these are the generations, is actually a place marker. We're going to find it again in chapter 5, verse 1, chapter 6, verse 9, chapter 10, verse 1, chapter 11, verse 27, and later on in Genesis. So it marks a place. That's one section of the narrative. And then when we get to these are the generations, that's actually going to mark another section of the narrative. So that tells us that chapter 2, from verse 4 through to chapter 4, verse to the end of chapter 4, is all one section together. And so it's focusing in. So it says, these are the generations of heaven and the earth when they were created in the day that the Lord made the earth and the heavens. So here it says, God made the earth and the heaven in one day. So, you know, yeah, in chapter 1 it says 7 days or 6 days, and here it says 1 day. So, you know, I think that we're not to take it necessarily literally. And I think that people who do take it literally, and God is very capable of doing it in a 24-hour period, but we need to think that, you know, these are not scientific terms. And when God says he made the heaven and the earth in that day, and then, yeah, so. Well, yeah.
So the day is marked by the sun, which you haven't yet created.
Yes, in the beginning. Yeah. So
a period of time.
Yeah. So, but as you said, Caleb, the order that is established in terms of how things were created, and like get creatures like birds and fish first, or sea creatures, and then land animals, is actually the pattern of it, what they've noticed in evolutionary theory. Many people say that it's a fact now. It's actually still only a theory. So, would someone like to read until the end of chapter 2? From verse 5 through to chapter verse 25.
We'll wait till the end of chapter 2, but everyone's going to put on the start.
It'll be fine.
This is the account of the heaven and the earth when they were created. When the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. Now no shrub had yet appeared on the earth, no plant had yet sprung, for the Lord had not sent rain on the earth, and there was no wind to work the ground. But streams came up from the earth, watered the whole surface of the ground. Then the Lord formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a being. Now the Lord God had planted a garden in the east, in Eden, and there he put the man he had formed. The Lord God made all kinds of trees grow out of the ground, trees that were pleasing to the eye and good for food. In the middle of the garden were the tree of life, and the tree of knowledge and good and evil. A river watering the garden flowed from there. It was separated into 4 headlands. The name of the first was Pishon.
Say it confidently, and we'll all just accept.
The name of the first was Pishon. It winds through the entire land of Havilah, where there is gold. The gold of that land is good, aromatic and present, and onyx are also there. The name of the second river is Gihon. It winds through it winds through the entire lands of Cush. The name of the third river is the Tigris. It runs along the east side of Asher. And the fourth river is the Euphrates. The Lord God took the man and put him in the garden to work and take care of him. And the Lord God commanded the man, "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. For when you eat from it, you will certainly die." The Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make him a helper suitable for him." Now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the wild animals and the birds of the sky. He brought them to the man to see what he would name them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was his name. So the man gave names to all the living stock, the birds in the sky, and all the wild animals. But for Adam, no suitable helper was found. So the Lord caused the man to fall into a deep sleep. And while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and then closed up the place with flesh. Then the Lord God made a woman he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. The man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man." That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united with his wife, and they become one flesh. Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame.
Excellent, thank you. God created what? So why did God create man?
So the
Yeah, so we see that there's a relationship with God, and then there's a relationship with the creation. So there's like God is kind of at the top, and then the animals are underneath. And then God makes man, and he actually needs another person so that he can actually carry out what God has charged him to do. The language is really important. So in verse 7, it says, the Lord God formed the man and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And that same word is the spirit. So this breath is God's spirit. And also, you know, we hear in chapter 1, God said and it was, but there's even a more intimate relationship here, because he didn't just say, let there be humans and they kind of suddenly appeared. He actually is intimately involved in forming them and filling them. So he forms them and then he fills them. So that actually helps. It's still part of the forming and filling. That is his purpose in chapter 1. And it's part of how he works in man. And then there's an order still. He makes the man and then he makes the woman. So this leads to a lot of contention. But this is still, okay, there's one thing that is not good in all of creation, and what's the not good thing? Yeah, so he needs this counterpart. He needs this other so that he can complete the purpose. Because without the other, he can't complete the purpose.
Sorry, I was just going to mention, I never realised that God didn't straight away make woman to be the man's companion. He first took all the animals for the man's name and no suitable help was found. I'd never noticed that. Just want to look that out.
Yeah, and why do you, like, what's the purpose of that? Like this, I mean, this isn't just incidental. Like, there's actually a purpose. What did Adam need to learn from this? Yeah, there's a need.
Yeah.
A need for him. Yeah. Because he's seeing all these animals that are able to be fruitful and multiply, and he can't, like, because he's not of their kind.
Yeah.
And they're meant to be subordinate to him. So, yeah, he needs someone on par. He needs someone who is able to complement and help him carry out this job that God's given to guard and keep. So there's two words in verse 15 that God took the man, put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. So there's two jobs that he has to do. He needs to work. So, you know, keeping in mind that this is where the rest is. So he's in this rest state, but there's still work. So it's not hard work. It's just got to work and keep the garden. So there's this element that what he needs to do is to work in it, be fruitful, and to keep it. So that's like protecting it. And so he's given him a job to protect this place, because from this place, God's image is going to extend into the rest of creation. So he's planted this special place, Eden, but from Eden is meant to grow to the whole world, the image of God. And so what they need to do is protect this place so that God's image can be multiplied.
And interesting, you know, it's particular work, but the work is no country before. God, humanity was given a job to do prior to the fall. There's a lot of people talk about work as if it's part of the curse, but we are created for a purpose to work.
Doesn't it say later, it says something about work.
Yeah.
And
that it will
There's
become hard.
a change in the
Yeah.
nature of
Yeah.
work.
Change.
Yeah. So there's a big change in the nature of the work, but it's still a part of who we are created to be. And so we are still going to carry out that feature of what God has created us to do. But now it's not going to be.
Instead of it being in a perfect creation, it's in an imperfect.
Yeah, because the nature of work changed, because work would never, there was no concept of it being negative. So the concept of work being hard, which is a feeling, was never really until after.
Yes, Genesis 3. I think.
Yeah, but
It says 19.
Yeah. yeah, so work is good. It's actually not difficult. Like there's no weeds. It's not like they have to weed the garden and it's really hard. Their work is to not be fruitful and multiply. So, it's pretty pleasurable.
So it's easy. But it's interesting, like Jules was saying, that, so in Proverbs it talks about the sloth, but it is actually not good to do nothing. God created us at first. He didn't create us to sit around and do nothing.
Like you said, that God is still working. So we have this day of rest.
Yes.
But God is still working because he hasn't finished. Like, I think the first one that I'm like, finished creating. It's not, because he hasn't created more. And so in his day of rest, continue to create.
Well, actually, it says in chapter 1, verse 27, he creates male and female. So,
But is that like,
so remember, we've got big picture and then a focus. So it's actually not saying, God stopped and this is where he's resting. Then creates the, like, I think that this is within that framework of God created his image, how male and female he created.
So it's like he's gone back in to expand chapter 1.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, actually, I better create something else. He created in chapter 1. He created man, male and female, created them. And then chapter 2 has gone in and it's like, let's expand that paragraph.
It's kind of like you're looking at the individual days. So you like zoomed in.
More detail.
More detail. Yeah. So he didn't kind of rest and then go, oops, no, I forgot something.
The other thing
Sounds like me though.
is that God is resting, but just like he created Adam just as Adam is working on his day of rest, God is still working on his day of rest.
Yeah.
But in the same way, it's not creating or doing anything new, it's maintaining. So,
Plus, I think we need to understand the concept of rest isn't sitting idly doing nothing. Actually, God is resting because he's enjoying his creation and the relationship with his creation. So rest is actually enjoying the presence of God. It doesn't mean you're not working. So God is continuing to maintain and sustain everything that he's done. So everything is being maintained and sustained by God. So he's continuing to do that into rest. And Adam and Eve are working because they're being fruitful and multiplying and keeping and protecting the garden. And so it's not like rest is this like lying on the beach doing nothing. It's actually enjoying the purpose for the creation.
That's one definition. Rest is actually unspoiled relationship with God. So we had it. They felt no shame. We had this unspoiled relationship with God, and God had created the garden for us to have unspoiled relationship with him. Then it got spoiled. And that's why for the rest, it's talking about, you'll see it through the Old Testament, through in New Testament Hebrews, that we're still seeking to enter that rest. And it will come again at the new creation. That's when that is total. So it's unspoiled relationship.
Yeah, so rest isn't the absence of doing things. but it is enjoying the relationship that God has created.
So I think that's helpful because that's but also then like when we're talking about this and going out and seeking and realizing that it's not a part of it. What's the significance of that if God is already created and he hasn't been do you know this?
Well, if this is like, we have to understand that he's actually kind of expanding this verse. And so, yes, God had already intended to create it, but Adam needs to work out that he needs someone to do this work.
Right.
Yeah. So
Because
she's
in-
not an afterthought. She's actually purposely there.
Because in chapter 1, for example, it doesn't talk about Adam. Chapter 2 does, so but it's like taking these two verses in chapter 1 and mounting. That in that time, like created man, let him name the animals, let him see there was no partner. Created with this that says male and female.
Can I also just mention, in chapter 1, it goes over and just glosses over, doesn't, like one said, it doesn't mention any of the fact that Adam named all the animals and sought this out. But can I also mention that God didn't say, and it was good, until after female was created.
Nice.
So God, like this whole situation is happening within the 5th day, or the 6th day. I think it is.
6th day,
6th day is happening within the 6th day, and then once female is created and man has realized that it needs a partner, then God says, and it was good, and then he can continue to the 7th day.
Yes.
Because there is now that opportunity for relationship.
So back to rest of today,
Yes.
they're not like
They're not mutually exclusive.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I was just trying to remember from the New Testament, something Jesus said, my father has been working till now and I've been working when the Jews were accusing.
Yeah.
Wow. God didn't just sit there.
Because he's working to sustain.
Yeah. And also Jesus says, come to me for rest. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. So it's actually not saying I'm not going to do anything. Yeah, so it's like you're with me. This relationship is what the rest is. And then we work together with Christ, in Christ, to do the work, which is glorify God. By fulfilling these commands to multiply and fill the earth and to guard and keep.
Can I ask a question? That's an interesting theory.
Okay,
Yeah,
love to hear interesting theories. Don't know whether I'll be able to answer.
No, it's just like, I just like your opinion. And it's that God hasn't rested yet because he hasn't yet reached the 7th day. And that the 7th day is the new creation. So that we're still living in the 6th day, and that's why God is still working, and why Jesus worked, and why work is still such a large thing. And then on the 7th day in the new creation, where everything is perfect, everything, including is completely lost.
I think that it's still not understanding the concept of rest and work. Like, I think that understanding shows that we think work is different from relating perfectly to God. Yeah. So like it seems clear that the 7th day is any time after that creation. But so it started, but what happened? In chapter 3, there's a disruption. Because instead of having the perfect relationship where we can enjoy the rest, it's interrupted by sin. And so therefore it needs to be restored.
I think it is a right understanding grace, because if you could even ask, no, I don't know, yes, but are we going to work in? If work is just but it will be Garden of Eden experience of work, as opposed to the curse experience of us. No droughts,
No droughts,
It's not hard toil. It's a joyful thing to do in a creation that is no longer under a curse. It's a creation was cursed as well. Coming to that next week. But yeah. How do you feel about health?
Some people do, lots of people do.
I think we can get you can sound that. But when you look through this section, in context, and God's intentions for everything that's correct, you can understand that it's not saying that it should be slaves or whatever.
I think my take on it is actually that it was a realization that God, that man wasn't enough on his own, so he needed help. It's not that the woman was inferior; it's the fact that the man couldn't do it on his own. So therefore, woman came into the world, made it capable. Continue.
Yeah, I think that the Bible continually tells us that it's necessary for the fulfillment of what God asked them to do. And it's necessary for the woman to be other than the man so that that can happen. Like they can't be identical because it won't work. They have to be other so that they can work in complementary. And it doesn't mean that the woman's inferior to the man, because they are equally created in God's image. They are equally dignified. They are equal in nature. They're both created in God's image. So there isn't like this thing that females are inferior because they were created second. Rather, they actually
created second.
yeah.
But they were both.
Yes.
Yes. Just something, it's often helpful to think too about our culture and reading of this for us as people in our century, in our culture. So just as a little bit of an aside, if you think about the role of women now, women are increasingly, the message is to be equal, we have to be the same. Okay, so to be equal to men, we have to be the same as men, so we have to have, there's all these ways that that's messaged in our culture. And so when you read something like this, and they're different roles, there's automatically the assumption is the Bible is saying one's not equal. But yeah, that's our culture. It's where we're interpreting what was here is actually saying, as you guys all said, it's about the role can only be done by these two different people working together.
Just to remember that translations, I think, and that sometimes the language that is translated, I think, to the spirit of breath. I think that's completely new, and that could possibly have happened with multiple different words in the sense of our interpretation of helper in the English language could be different from the original English.
Well, our understanding of what helper is
Yeah.
The help, we'll get the help, but it's a very derogatory.
Yeah.
It's used as slaves, it was used as servants. This is the help, but yeah, God, this word is used of God.
Yeah, this word is used of the Holy Spirit, it's used of God, and so there is an equality. Like we see that there's God, Father, Son, and Spirit, and yet within that Trinity there is kind of an order. And they're perfectly equal, they're perfectly in relationship, and none is more important than the other, but there is an order, like there's the Father, the Son, and the Spirit, and and they work
Each,
As-
each has
as-
a purpose.
as different, but they work together. And that is the point of male and female, is that we're to reflect the nature of God, who is Father, Son, and Spirit, and they work together, separate, different, they all work together to perform their purpose as who God is. I feel like the Holy Spirit or the Spirit is like the third. Like God, we need to be in relationship with God, and He's the third part of our dynamic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Three strands is very separate. Yeah.
It's supposed to be, but having the spirit in there which creates a link between them, which is our man need to go in.
Yes. And then we get in the New Testament this teaching about marriages that reflects Christ in the church. And that's like the purpose here, is that the man and the woman become one flesh, and they together reflect the image of God. And so the relationship God has with humans is reflected in that relationship as well.
When you say that order is creation, and like man being created first, like is that you say that that's you believe that woman is created second, or is it God created male and female at the same time, but this idea of Adam being created first is just illustrated in the fantasy. This is an illustrated text to show that we need each other, but did he actually?
Oh.
Male and female?
Well, I think that if God said, this is how I did it, then we need to say, okay, yeah.
Like,
He created woman from there.
yeah, and also, but like he also says he did it in 7 days, but we're saying we don't believe he did it in 7 days.
I think there is an order that's said in chapter 1 where it says he created man, then says it's not good for men to be alone, then it takes the river and creates it. So man is created from the dust, woman is created from the river.
And
There
the
is-
dust.
There is an order.
But then like I feel like that he was kind of treated to use that he always intended to create her. Why would he create man? And man is not really alone. I will now create woman.
Because man needed to understand that man could not do it properly. So by creating man first, letting him be there with the animals, realizing that without something else, that at that point man did not know, but without something else there, woman coming into the picture afterwards, God's giving man the understanding that man can't do it without woman, which is why woman is then created to show that men now with women, it is perfect.
So is it had been days that is the
No, I feel like it's like this is a story, but this is like one part that we're taking very much.
okay?
Yeah, I mean,
But it feels like it's like an illustration, of like it's illustrated rather than
yes.
this is the literal.
Yeah, I think, if we want to be, although if we think about
Paul does say in the New Testament man is created first.
Yeah, I was just looking for.
yes, so the way the New Testament interprets it, and Jesus himself, when he talks about
But why?
that's
Think about what, it's a great question. So just have a think about why, like, I guess just have a think about what difference that would make to you or.
No,
Yeah.
well, I was just wondering, because like it feels confusing that he's created mankind as male and female. But he also didn't to start with. Yeah. So like I'm like.
And you're right, like the first.
People think is.
Yeah.
As a progressive world is created. Male. Like did he create it? So
I think
maybe
before we
this
can
is
hold-
illustrated, we can say it's created by illustration rather.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can hold both of them together at the same time, because he did create man in his image, but he didn't do it maybe in exactly the same way, like we created man one way and created woman.
Maybe the purpose of this verse is to say they are both created to be the image of God. They're both, and that's the purpose of this little bit of poetry in verse 27. Whereas chapter 2 is telling us something different. It's telling us about the relationship between them. As opposed to in chapter 1, where it's actually saying they're both the image of God, and both to be the image of God. But look, that's just something to think about. That's really good.
I think part of that kind of bigger picture comes down to the concept of harmony, because if you're breaking it down as, I think as you said before, we take one literally and one not literally. I think you can more or less take chapter 1 literally if you understand that time was not, like, God is beyond time. So him saying a day does not mean our 24-hour period. So here, when he said in the verse, God created mankind in his own image, and then the image of God he created them, and he created them. That all happens on the 6th day, but that day isn't our day. That's on a 24-hour period. So you can still take it literally that he has done that, but it's not in the time period that we perceive. It could have happened over hundreds of years in our understanding of time.
They're great questions. Really
Yeah,
good questions.
and I think that questions, and it helps you. Like it's important as we read the Bible to go, okay, so when do we take things literally? When do we take things figuratively? But I think that we can hold both of these accounts because they're not meant to be counter each other. They're meant to complement each other and complement our understanding of what it means to be created in God's image. And I think it's more about there is an order, but there's also about the purpose. The purpose is that they are at the end, and the poem in 23 is kind of reflecting the poem in 27, like that poetic bit, is that, this is bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. Like we are created in both of us together, but we are the same. She is the same as me. We are both equal in God's eyes. We've both been created by God. The process that we've been seeing here is kind of different, but it still reflects the same things. 127. We are both in God's image. She is the same as me. We're together here. We're both in this together.
Actually, it's a good question. It makes sense because we're saying at the beginning of chapter 1, they go through the order 1 to 6, but then actually you can see that they're about forming and filling. So, yeah, it's a good question. And I think that's the way to always approach it. Okay, what doesn't quite make sense, and so how do I try to understand this? What's the purpose of this particular part?
And I think that, just at the end of Genesis, we get this understanding of what it means to be united as a marriage. So there is important instruction about marriage, which Jesus himself looks back to and said this is what God has designed. We want to understand it the way that Jesus did. And this final verse, the man and his wife were both naked, shamed. What is that? Why would it say that? Why do we need to understand that as being like, what does the chapter end on? Yeah, exactly.
ideal relationship. And, I think it's what we should be aiming for when it comes to marriage, obviously. This is before.
It's very interesting if you look and just jump in at 3 verse 8. They heard the sound of the Lord walking in the garden in the cool of the day. The enemies hid themselves from the presence of the Lord among the trees. And the Lord God said to them, "Why? Where are you?" And they said, "I was afraid because I was naked." And so now, as a result of fall, shame. And it's not just shame within marriage, it's shame. It's the whole concept of shame, which is massive. Yeah, fear, anxiety,
guilt,
shameability. Yeah. And it's come once our perfect relationship with God. And it plays out in marriage, but it actually plays out. Yeah. In every.
So is there any other thoughts on this? So this foundation is essential because we need to understand the whole purpose of God, so that we can understand the rest of God. And so I guess what's the big picture that God is, that we were created for? Is the rest, is the enjoyment of the presence of God altogether. And so, yeah, that is the whole point of creation, is that we enjoy this perfect relationship with God, and bear His image, fill the whole world with His image, so that He's glorified.
First 2 chapters of the entire Bible have all of creation and all of the perfection, and the rest is about trying to restore it.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the chapters from here on every other.
Yeah. And so the rest of the Bible points to Revelation chapter 22. But we need to understand chapter 3 of Genesis so that we get to Revelation 22. So, because here at the end of chapter 2, we don't need Revelation because this is perfect. They're in God's place, they're under God's rule, they're living the way God made them to live, they're enjoying His presence, there's no shame, and so they are fulfilling the purpose that God has created to fulfill. Yeah, so just remembering those words, working and keeping, because they're going to come again later. And the instruction in verse 17, which God gave to Adam. You may eat of every tree in the garden. So God's given them this beautiful garden. There's all these beautiful trees to eat. And there's 2 special ones, the tree of life and the tree of good and evil. And there's only one tree that they're told not to eat from. That's the tree. Knowledge. Yeah. Yes, the knowledge of good and evil. Sorry. Yeah. And what's the consequence? Something that I think Adam can't even comprehend because he doesn't know what it is. What's the consequence if they eat? Death. Yeah, I don't think Adam would even comprehend what that would be. Because if you are in a relationship and it's an eternal relationship, sin doesn't end. If you're in an eternal relationship with God, what does it mean to die? Like, I think that's a question. I don't know, like I think.
Would animals?
Don't know.
Yeah.
Well, it appears that there's no death. Like,
Okay.
yeah, so there's no death. Animals are multiplying and yeah, there's no death.
What else is really interesting, just as a side, all the animals in are vegetarian.
Yes.
And that's why the lion can have over the land.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, yes, yeah, they're vegetarians, they're only.
Yeah, so if you look, yeah,
So in other words, us sitting stuffed animals up to mineral animals.
Well, God does say man we're allowed to eat, meat, but
Yeah.
that wasn't that, it's interesting, because you often think, how can it, you know, with the image in your life, so it's all interesting.
yeah, no, so, yeah, if you look at verse 30, in chapter 1, to every beast of the earth and to every bird and to everything that creeps, I have given every green plant food. And the same to humans. I'm giving you every tree and fruit to eat. So you can eat whatever you like of the fruits and green things. And also this idea is started here in verse 5, the Lord had not caused it to rain. Because there's no rain necessary, because there's enough, like the ground is producing, there's rivers. So I think store that in your head as well, because rain is something. There's no rain, there's no drought, there's no judgment.
It says there's a mist.
There is a mist.
That
There is a
doesn't
mist,
water
but that's
enough.
not the same as rain.
No,
Yeah.
but I think not
Yeah.
just rivers.
No, so God is completely providing perfectly for all of his creation without the need for rain and without the need for anything to die. Yeah. Yeah. Which is interesting. So yeah, we don't actually, a little spoiler, you don't actually hear that word again until and here it's saying there's no rain. Yeah. Just little things like that.
It's one of the reasons you just keep studying the Bible, because you never get to the bottom of it, there's always something new. And just also, just the word for made in the image is actually more likely to be
Yeah.
So it's not that, you know, we don't look like God. Our role is to be his image, which I think we talked about. That it's really interesting.
Yeah.
It changes how you kind of read that. We are created to be his image. So the New Testament's picked up, you know, we are to be the light, we are to be ambassadors, we are to be his image.
Yeah. And so we represent God's character. Kingship. So there's this idea of rain.
Is it king?
Authority.
Authority.
I love the way you take your glasses on, Quincy, you're so intelligent.
No, it's specifically that this does.
That's funny, I was seriously much. So now, I think.
Yeah. So, the outline suggests that next week we look at rebellion and judgment. I would like to propose that we look at rebellion and judgment and the patriarchs, see how we go. So that's true. That's to get to the end of Genesis. So if you feel like you can do those, or even like if you don't read, listen to those readings. So Genesis 3 to 11, and then Genesis 12 to 22 and 37 to 50. So there's quite a lot of chapters, but if you think about it, and if you can like just listen to an audio of the Bible, then you can probably at least just get the gist of what's in those chapters. Okay, so Genesis 3 to 11, chapters 3 to 11. That is rebellion and judgment, and then Genesis 12 to 22, which is calling of Abraham, And then 37 to 50 is just the last few chapters of Genesis. So it helps us put us into being ready to look at Exodus. So chapters 12 to 50 tells the story of Abraham.
And look, I assume you know this, that like we used to have to pay for it to buy tapes of the Bible. But like if you go to your Bible, yeah, or anything, there's
Plenty
you
of
know,
versions.
there's any version.
The other recommended readings or recommended texts for the course. So if you want to study more in depth, you can find them in the beginning of the book. If you want to just come along and just feel part of the chat and not do this, that's fine. You can do that. But I did get a message from Helen just saying that she's actually going to put through another registration with Moore College on the 1st of March. So if you want to, you can register through LMAP, and then you will get these texts after the 1st of March.
Yeah, this is
so-
a really old one. Literally 20 years ago.
And it's exactly the same. So yeah, they haven't changed much. So yeah, so if you are not interested in doing the exam, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to do the exam. Find yourself a copy. I've got the only one from the church library. So, yeah, there are copies around, people who've done books. So grab yourself a copy, and if you don't want to do the exam, that's fine. And just come along and enjoy the conversation. But if you do want to do the exam, you do need to register so that you can progress to your certificate. So, you know, each unit, you get a certificate, and then when you've got 15 units, you get a certificate of preliminary theological certificate. You get a preliminary PTC, preliminary theological certificate. So if you want to get pieces of paper, that will then help you to I don't know, be able to do whatever. Or get kind of some advanced standing. Yeah, that might motivate you. So Sandy's also got
This is just totally extra, and it's not so much on just the particular units, but just a little bit of an overview of Genesis, and just it's quite good. It just talks through. So, for example, what you see in Genesis. So, how we see.
It's from a commentary.
It's from the front of the commentary. Just a second. It talks about how, like Jules was saying, how it sets a scene for the themes you see right through the rest of the Bible. So Christ, forgiveness, judgment, you know, all there. So it's just a really good little overview, which you can or don't have to read.
Yeah.
About.
An extra book that's not on the list of that's included there. This book, if you want to keep going and do the rest of the Bible courses, this book goes through every single book of the Bible in using like really good. Called God's Glory and Salvation Through Judgment. Julie Hamilton. It's expensive, but it's a good investment. And I would like to refer you to a brilliant podcast called Bible Talk by 9 Marks. You can just access it on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And 9 Marks. Yeah, Bible Talk. And the authors are 9 Marks. Just number 9 Marks. And basically, three guys. They're all kind of pastors. From one is a theological seminary professor, and they go through all the books. They go all through all the books of the Pentateuch, and they are very interesting too. And a lot of the stuff, the extra stuff that I'm going to tell you comes from faith. Well worth listening to after you've read, listened to the passages. Dive in. They start from Genesis 1, they go all the way through to the end of Deuteronomy. They're half-hour segments, around 44, 45 minutes. Yeah. Some of them are half an hour, but most of them go between 45 minutes, around 45 minutes. So if you've got a trip in the car or wherever, or walking, they're really good to listen to. And I highly recommend them if you want a little more in-depth stuff than what's just. Because this is going to provide good foundations, but yeah, these guys are brilliant, and they have really good insights to stuff. And they pick up on things like those words, because one of them's a Hebrew scholar, and he knows his Hebrew so well that he can tell you where the word plays are, what, it's so interesting.
Sorry, Jill, what was it called?
Bible Talk.
What's in Ryan? Bible Talk.
Yeah, great. Would someone like to pray just to finish?
Yeah. Dear God, thank you for your word that we can read it and talk about it so freely that, you've given it to us to get to know you more, that is speak us through. I pray that as we continue to do this, that you will keep using your spirit in us, that you help us to understand your word and purpose us in your creation, and that we can use to see how you align with Jesus to be a huge part of it. Amen.